The views and opinions on Where Did the Road Go belong to those making them. Do not mistake allowing freedom of speech for agreement. This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by the following amazing individuals: Greg Ross, Bill Illuminati, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, and Michael Frisky. Thank you all for helping to make this show possible. And if you'd like to help out, become a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month for lots of extra content.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have with me Barbara Fisher.
Hello, how you doing?
Of the on hiatus 7 Degrees of John Keel podcast.
It's only 6 degrees.
Why do
But maybe if I start it back up, I'll call it 7.
I keep calling it 7. Why do I call it 7?
I don't know.
Huh.
I don't know.
And
It's a lucky number. I don't know.
Jonathan Bartholomew of the Seeker and Skeptic, or Skeptic and Seeker?
Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic.
Okay. I completely bummed. See, I did much worse on that one.
It's all good.
No worries. We'll cut you some slack.
I'm lucky I remember the name of my own show.
Okay, what's the name of your show?
I don't know.
See?
There have been times I've called it, I've said, welcome to the last exit for the, hang on. And
the last exit for the road, which, we lost the road. What happened?
Last exit for the lost road went. Anyway, yeah, so you're both podcast hosts, and you've never been on together. And Jonathan, you were living up here for what, 6 months?
About 7 months, yeah.
Okay, we hung out a total of 0 times.
Yeah, we're not good at scheduling things.
We did try.
Yeah, we made the effort, and then snow happened because you live in the great white north. Yes, you learned what like far north New York State snow is, lake effect snow is like. No, thank you.
Because I think the day we were supposed to meet, it was supposed to be lake effect snow, and you're like, I don't think we're supposed to get much. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're in lake effect country. You have no idea.
Yeah, much has a very different meaning.
Like it could be an inch, or it could be 2 feet.
And you can go a mile, and that's the difference between an inch and 2 feet.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I've driven into
the craziest part.
I was driving south on Route 81 from Watertown to Syracuse, and it was a nice clear night in the middle of the winter, full moon. It was beautiful, and no snow at all. And I see this tractor trailer going the other way, covered in snow. And I'm like, the hell? Why is he covered in snow? And then I come around the turn, and there's like a foot of snow on the road. And I have this light little Toyota Corolla with rear-wheel drive, and I'm doing like 90. And I'm just going tap brakes, tap brakes, tap brakes, tap brakes, tap brakes.
Oh, no. Oh, no. That does not sound like fun.
No, it was not. I was okay, though. But like it was literally a line. It was just a wall where there was no snow on one side and like a foot of it on the other.
One time when Zach and I lived near Columbus, Ohio, which is in the central part of the state, and it doesn't get lake effect snow. You get that in the far north up near Lake Erie. But even so, we did get strange weather. We had been told when we bought that house, we have mild winters here. It never snows. The 2 years we lived there, it snowed like crazy, and it was just insane. But there was an ice storm that came through, and it was one of those things where it's snowing and blowing, and there's a tornado and thunder. And then ice comes down, and literally the tornado flew over our house and then landed in the yard of my doctor, who lived a couple miles away from us, and tore out like a whole bunch of trees.
Wow.
And, we heard it. Zach was like, what's that freight train sound? I was like, well, that could be death. That could be our goodbye. I was like, that's a tornado. And he's like, should we go to the basement? I said, no, because it's right on top of us. we're not going to get there.
Right.
So, but we didn't get hit. But when we came out the next day, of course, we had no electricity. The entire forest that we lived in was covered in what looked like glass and snow, and it was gorgeous. But the ice was so thick, it was breaking branches all through the woods. So we couldn't even go out in the woods to see it. Damn. And it was right before Christmas. So a few days later, it's Ohio, so they cleared the roads. We went to pick up Morgana. And so we're going down Interstate 70. We're going east. One side of 70, snow-covered, ice-covered, beautiful winter landscape. Other side, typical Ohio landscape of winter with no snow, mud, gray, ugly. It was so weird. And it literally, the dividing line was the highway.
That's crazy. Yeah,
it's kind of like you going around the bend and then, whoa.
A couple of years ago, Buffalo got 6 feet of snow, but there was literally a line down the middle of the city where the other one side of the line got 6 feet of snow, the other side got nothing.
Oh, jeez, that's wild. I do remember when that happened, though, because I was watching the news going, oh, wow. That's what my mom was always talking about, how, West Virginia doesn't get real snow because she was born in Buffalo. So she's like, yeah, I don't understand why you kids get out of school. We would... we'd dig tunnels through the snow to get to the road, and the school bus would come pick us up. They had snow plows and cleared everything. Sometimes it was over our heads, and I always thought she was full of crap. And then I saw that and went, okay, she's not. Wow. That's some serious crap. It looks like houses are only like 8 inches tall. Wow.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
So Jonathan, you when we talked, when you were going to come out, actually, you were saying a lot of weird stuff happened to you when you moved up here. And then on top of that, you finished a book that you just published, although it'll be a few weeks ago by the time this airs. And you're putting the finishing touches on volume 2 of it. You want to talk about that real quick first?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first novel is called Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine, which is I took it from a Doors album. From the 70s. This has got some meaning for me. But the what started it was a series of lucid dreams that I had from November to December of 23. So like a little over a year ago. And the context of that was I did kind of a dream experiment with a group of people that I met through the Discord for another podcast called Vase.
Oh yeah,
you're probably familiar with those guys. Those guys are great. But the crux of the experiment was a group of people for that period of time was fixating on the symbol for that podcast is actually a sigil, and so we all did different things dealing with that. I actually printed it out and put it in my pillowcase and slept with it every night.
Oh. And
from the first night on, and lucid dreams is not abnormal for me. I've dealt with that my entire life. But from that night on, for that entire time frame, I had a series of dreams that connected like a narrative. It was like I was in a movie. The first of which was Brittany, my girlfriend, and I were in a large city. We were searching for funnily enough, it was a copy of John Keel's Eighth Tower, and we had found it, and there was these 2 other people who were looking for it as well, who were like racing us to it, and they said they needed it more than we did, so we gave it to them, and they just felt like real people to me, and that's kind of what got me started with an idea of people in kind of a dreamscape. This is what I call the area behind dreams, where we're all connected in creative ways. And that through that experiment with lucid dreaming and journaling and the sigil, that culminated on the last day of that. I woke up and I was awake. I was not asleep anymore. And I looked over at the side of my bed, and there was someone standing above my bed looking at me. And it was a male looking, about 6 feet tall, made of shadow. And I wasn't afraid. I wasn't concerned. I just had this feeling of curiosity coming off of this figure. And it just kind of tilted his head, just looked very curious, and then it melted away. And that was the last day of the experiment. That was the last in that, after the series of dreams. And a few days later, I started writing this book.
All right. How long did it take you to write it?
First book took me until September.
When did you start?
I started the last day of 2023, so a little over 9 months.
You had sent it to me last year, and I read the first chapter, and I went, "Oh, this is really interesting." But I don't look at my ebooks that often, and just kind of forgot. And
Gotcha.
I had other stuff I needed to read for guests, and so I went through those. And then I'm like opening up my ebook, and I'm reading one book, and I'm going, "I don't know if I really like this book. I don't know if I'm going to have the person on to talk about it." And then I'm like, "What's Scenes from a Gold Mine?" and I click on it, and I'm like, "What is? Oh, it's Jonathan's. Oh, I really liked this. I should continue reading it," which I did. I haven't finished it yet, but I like it. It's well written. It's different. I can't quite place what it puts me in the mind of, but it has a very distinct feel to it.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. I've not had anyone be able to give me, because like one of the things that people ask you about is what's a comparable book, like what's something, especially when you're thinking about doing like advertising for a thing, you want to be able to be like, if you like X and Y, you will like this thing. And I can't figure out myself. I've had people say Inception. I've had people say Twin Peaks. I've had people. The closest thing I can come is there is a comic series from like 15 years ago called The Secret Life of D.B. Cooper. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a really awesome one where D.B. Cooper was a psychonaut agent of the CIA and disappeared into like this weird, bizarre world after he jumped out of that plane. And to me, there's kind of a little bit of similarity there with that.
I could definitely see the Twin Peaks comparison, though, especially with some of the stuff in the beginning. So.
Well, I definitely can't complain about anyone making that comparison.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is available where?
Pretty much everywhere. Amazon's probably the easiest way. Again, it's called Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine. I really wanted to use a little snippet of like maybe Celebration of the Lizard King by Jim Morrison as like the first thing entering the book. I looked into it, and the company that has the rights for all the Doors lyrics wants like $300 a minimum for anything, even if you're like self-publishing. So that's never going to happen.
Wow.
But you can't copyright song titles. You can't copyright album names. So I took Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine as the name. And the second one, which should be out in the next month or so, that one I wrote in 37 days.
Wow.
And that one's called The Head on the Door.
So you can use the name of the song, but you can't use lyrics. It's not like there's no what's it called?
Fair use?
Yeah.
No fair use for lyrics. And you can thank BMI for that over the 50s and 60s. They court case after court case after court case. Like there's arguments to be made for some poetry. There's arguments to be made for obviously snippets of books and magazine articles and stuff. But if it's a lyric of anything, you got to pay or they're going to own your product.
Wow.
Which is a real bummer. I just wanted like 6 lines out of that one song.
Yeah. Because I feel like I've seen people use lyrics and stuff.
That means that either they or their publisher has paid for it, for sure.
Well, if you're self-publishing, though, maybe they just kind of slipped by.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can take the chance. But, I have, kind of hopes on some stuff with this, especially actually about a week ago, I actually signed a contract for an audiobook for the first book with Skyboat Media, which is owned by Stefan Rudnicki. And he is my very favorite audiobook narrator. I just love that guy. And he is going to narrate this book.
All right. That's awesome.
And that should be out on the 15th of April, assuming things go as they're supposed to go, which, things happen.
Yeah. So, since the last time you've been on, you want to get into some of the weirdness you've experienced?
Oh, sure. So when we moved up to Oswego, the day we moved in, we actually moved into my girlfriend's grandmother's house, which is basically owned by the family. Like nobody had lived there for about a year and a half. We needed a place to stay that was going to be inexpensive for a little while. It gave us both the time to do some writing and to try to explore some other things. And some of them worked out, some of them didn't. The day we moved in, and again, no one had been living in this place for a year and a half at least. We walked in the house and we started smelling spaghetti and meatballs. And no one had cooked in that place in a very long time. We hadn't even bought food yet. We'd driven 10 hours. We were exhausted. And every Sunday for 40 years, Brittany's grandmother had made handmade homemade spaghetti sauce and meatballs in that house. And her grandfather, I believe I don't know if he died in the house or not, but he definitely passed away about 12 years ago. And people, I think, have said that they have kind of felt like there might be some presence there. But several times throughout the 6 months we lived there, we smelled, and she said it smelled exactly like her grandmother's recipe, which I've never had it, but she had throughout her entire life. And so, it's one of the things, and one of the things that is kind of funny about that for me is throughout doing our podcast, a lot of people talk about, clairaudience or clairvoyance, but apparently there's a clair for each sense. And one of those is for smell. So I spent months kind of making fun of the smell thing of like, I've never heard anyone talking about having, spooky smells in their life and, supernatural smells. And so after about 2 or 3 months of that, I started having weird smell experiences. And for me, kind of the culmination of that was, the several experiences of when there couldn't be any scent at all of that very, like, and with that smell, even though I had never experienced one of those meals because I haven't been around that long with that family.
Yeah.
I did kind of get a sense of like home in a way that makes no sense for me as a person. And so that kind of made it for me to be a thing that is kind of on the strange side. I'm sorry.
Oh, I will say Joshua Cutchin wrote an entire book on paranormal smells.
The brimstone
really?
deceit.
Yep. And sulfur's the most common smell, surprisingly, which is also the smell of decay, which makes me think these things are impermanent. But what you're describing, I mean, maybe it's what your body is interpreting as a smell. But if you're saying it has that home feel, maybe there's more information there that you can't process directly. So you're just kind of getting the feeling and the smell from it. Oh,
maybe. Yeah, that's an interesting thought for sure. But through that time we were there, the way we had things set up, we each had an office set up, and the room I had taken as an office. The door, you look out the door and you can see part of the living room where there's a turntable there where apparently he used to listen to a lot of music and stuff, and that's where they had like a fireplace and stuff. And so it kind of seems to me like it was kind of like a communal kind of place where a lot of entertainment happened. I would be sitting there like writing or something, and out of my peripheral, there was movement almost every time. There was just something moving there. And, we don't have pets, there was no windows open. Like the house was sealed. There's no vents there. There's nothing. And so I was seeing something, and I never got any bad feelings about the place. There's because you kind of, you get these like transient feelings of different things of like, man, maybe I shouldn't be here. I've had that plenty of times in my life. And it's like, well, this is not the place for me. Never got a single one of those. It was always neutral to positive, but there was always kind of like this, like almost like something was like going back and forth on from one part of where that turntable is to where the fireplace used to be, back and forth.
Like he was changing records.
That's what it kind of felt like to me.
That's pretty cool.
Huh.
Did you start hearing music?
Never did, but I will say, and this is something that kind of makes me feel like I'm not crazy. Is about 3 months into it, no one had ever so he died, I think 12 years ago. And Brittany's grandmother, she's actually still around, but she has some trouble walking. She's like 96.
Wow.
Has some trouble walking. So she's in an assisted living place because she just needs the help.
Yeah.
And, but she's still she'll still beat you at cards and she'll laugh at you. Like she's good. She just couldn't quite be on her own anymore.
Yeah.
But nobody had ever cleared out the house after he passed. Things had not been thrown away. Like, like things over a lifetime, things just pile up.
Yep.
And a lot of her family had stored a bunch of furniture and stuff in the basement. It was a fully furnished basement. It was actually a pretty sweet house in a lot of ways. And so about 3 months into us being there, because it looked like we were going to be doing a specific thing that just never panned out in that house, we had to have a bunch of stuff taken out to make, to be able to start fixing things up. So we had all the old furniture and all the heavy stuff and boxes of papers from 1986. I think there was like a phone book from like 2001, like just stuff that just never got thrown away. carted out. And once that happened, seeing this stuff got less often.
Interesting.
Like maybe he was, he had a strong connection to certain pieces of like maybe the furniture stuff. There was some antique furniture that got moved to another family member's house. Like they didn't like get rid of it or anything.
Yeah.
But like it just needed to go somewhere else. And once that happened, we started smelling that smell less often. The moving back and forth thing, instead of happening every couple of days, happened maybe once every couple of weeks. And so that is interesting to me. I wish I could have kind of a way to pinpoint maybe what item it might be that there was a connection to, or maybe it was just the fact that nothing had moved in so long.
It could have been all the items. I mean, just as a general, congealing of energy.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the stone tapes idea of like energy being in a set place, maybe those things not moving made it part of that set place.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Well, I was going to say that if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it happen? I mean, you change the environment by simply moving in. And it just could be that was just enough to sort of shake things loose. And that's part of why you started experiencing these little things. Or there is a little ripple in time right there. And so what you were experiencing was a little time loop. And one wonders if he was on the other side and was like, I feel like there's somebody over there while he's, putting his records on and changing songs and all that. It's like, I don't know who that is. Because, of course, he wouldn't have known who you were.
Right.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that if anyone who's ever read anything that Eric Wargo ever put out has got to question the idea of linear time,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The smell thing, one of the things I realized recently, one of the few places in my house I do not have a camera is the hallway, which is a very liminal place because it connects like the newer part of the house to the older part of the house. It's the place we most often hear footsteps from. And every once in a while, it smells really bad in the hallway, like almost like sewagey. And I'm like, what is that from? Because the washer and dryer are right there. The bathroom's on the other side. But I, one day, sat there and I'm like, I'm going to find this damn smell. It's not from the washer and dryer. You get over by the washer and dryer, it goes away. It's not coming from the bathroom. I went downstairs into the crawl space. It's not coming from down there. Above it is another bedroom. I went up there. It's not coming from up there. I'm like, it's literally just sitting in the middle of the hallway. I'm like, now it's weird.
Somebody used to go out in the hallway to release gas so as to not upset anybody.
Maybe. It would have. It was the entranceway at one point.
Huh.
But like I said, also there's the footsteps from that area too. So it's kind of like, okay, this spot right here has weird stuff going on, and I don't know what it is. Like I didn't associate the smell with the weird stuff until I realized I couldn't find a source for it. Like if a mouse died in the wall or something, that would be one thing, but it's more consistent than that, Like that would just go away eventually.
Yeah. Unless you had a family of mice, it's like, well, that's where we go to die.
Right. Well, I mean,
possible. That's the death room. We go there. Like the elephant graveyard in The Lion King.
So what else has happened, Jonathan?
So in July, we actually went to see the Seth House.
Oh,
and that was cool. It was like on my birthday, and like that's what I chose to do with my birthday this year. It was like, all right, let's go see this house where this lady channeled all this weird stuff, and we met Oshara, super nice lady.
Yes, she is.
And she was kind enough to let us come and hang out for several hours and tell stories about the place. But we got to walk around the property, and we got to go throughout the house. And so the room, and I know you've been there because I saw the video.
Yeah.
Soraya. But so you know this, but other people might not. So the room that she had done all the channeling in was this one room that's upstairs. And I like experience things and sometimes I don't. But Brittany is very sensitive to like energy and stuff. This is the thing that she's experienced her entire life. And she channels. She actually just put out a book of channeled information herself. And, she's like, do you want to, this lady's like, do you want to see the room where Jane did most of the channeling and did all this, did the writing? We're like, absolutely. So we go upstairs. And once we hit the second floor, it's weird to say, but it almost felt like we were in a different house. It was almost like we were in a different place. Like the air felt different. Everything seemed different about it. And there was a very positive feeling. It's like positivity was like pumped into the room almost. Yeah. This is a really weird feeling for me, for sure. And Brittany kind of described it as just kind of a buzzing feeling throughout her entire body. And it just, we sat down up there and we hung out for a little while, and it just was a very just a generally positive but very strange experience.
Did she show you the carriage house?
Just the outside of it. Apparently it's not super safe in there, she said.
Yeah. We went up. It definitely seems. I mean, the thing is, it has very, very weird energy. And we thought, like, when you're walking in there, it feels like you're off balance. And like Chris had a level on his phone, and he'd put it on the floor. And he's like, "This floor is 100% level." It's like, seriously, how is that possible? So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked that it's not completely safe. I don't, but it's a weird place, and I have no explanation for why it's so weird.
I will say, throughout the conversation with her, and I actually don't know how you feel about this specific tool, Soraya. You might like it, you might not. I think that there's a lot of different ways to view this, but I'm very interested just on the academic level with the Estes method. And I asked her, I said, if we came back, if I could, if I'd come back with Estes equipment, I explained what it was. She didn't know what it was. I explained what Estes method was. Would you be willing to let us give that a try? And she said yes. And so that's a maybe for the future.
Well, maybe we can coordinate that. I've been meaning to get back in touch with Oshara and go back down there.
That would be great. I would definitely. I mean, her folks still live, in Oswego. We're going to be back and forth to New York for years and years to come. Good. So, we definitely will be able to do something in person for sure.
I was going to say something else about the Seth house, but I forgot what it was. Okay. What's next on your list of weirdness?
Well, most of the things from this time frame have been kind of, the smaller things that add up to like a list.
Yeah.
I will say that on our trip back from there, as we were driving up, I wish I knew the name of the highway we were on. We were beside a lake the entire time. It's a smaller highway. It was a really pretty drive. We kept seeing. I mean, I guess it could have been a drone, but we saw for too many miles to be a drone, in my opinion. And it didn't have flashing lights. It's static lights. It was a round white light and a square red light right beside each other in front of us the entire time, no matter how we turned, for probably 15 miles, which rules out drones to me, plus no flashing lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
Also, you mentioned, you said you didn't know how I feel about the Estes method. I don't know how I feel about the Estes method. I just had a conversation on the show with someone about it. It was when Josh was on for the Lady of the Lake, and Ryan Rolick. Because they used that in the Lady of the Lake documentary. And like the first concept of just the radio waves and interpreting what it says, I think leaves a lot open for, interpretation and being able to, when you're hearing the question, you're thinking you're kind of listening for certain things, and sort of an audio pareidolia can happen.
Yeah.
But when you're responding to things that you don't know have been asked, I'm almost wondering if it's not 100% that you're getting communication through the device as much as the device is putting you in an altered state of consciousness.
Well, that chicka 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 noise.
Yeah.
It's a repetitive rhythmic sound. And as someone who's done some shamanic type training, yeah, the sound of a rattle sounds a lot like that. And it could be that you're going into a trance.
I mean, speaking of Eric Wargo, on Hellier, when they're doing that and he sees the bottle or whatever, and then he sees the bottle later and he's like, oh my God, that's the bottle. I'm like, and that's your time loop. You just got all emotional and excited about finding the bottle you saw earlier, which is why you saw it earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think Eric Wargo put up a thing saying that exact thing. So, yeah, the Estes method is interesting. I'm kind of curious to try it just because it does seem a little more reliable than the standard just listening for something on the radio tuner. At the same time, though, you still have some expectation in there. So unless you're going in blind.
Yeah, it would be interesting if you brought someone in who didn't know where they were going, right?
Yeah.
And who didn't really vibe with knowing what the Estes method is in the first place. And you just popped the blindfold on, slapped the helmet on their heads with the headphones, and then said, whatever you hear, repeat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? I mean, maybe I'm just a sort of a sicko that way. I really think that is something that goes beyond the kind of typical ghost hunting methods, and it would be really interesting to do.
Yeah, that would be very interesting because like everybody's got that one friend who's just down for anything, right? It was like they just don't need an explanation. I've got a friend that would just be like, "Yeah, whatever, let's go. I'll put on a blindfold. Let's do it," and have no idea what's happening. He would find that hilarious.
And you hope it's because he trusts you, but you never know.
Right.
You said there was something that happened to you as a kid that connected into something now.
Yeah. So this is, the only time I've ever mentioned any part of this before is Mike Clellan actually came on our podcast about 9-10 months ago. And I told him this on that because it seemed kind of adjacent to some things that he had alluded to before. So I'm 43, and so at this time I was in third grade when this happened, which would have been 88, 89, somewhere in there. I'm from a town called Lumberton, North Carolina, which is right in the center of the state. And if you're not from the area, you don't know what Lumberton is. But the city that's closest to it is Fayetteville. And anyone who's familiar with the UFO part of weirdness probably knows who Chris Bledsoe is. He's from Fayetteville. So we're from the same part of the state, just 10 years apart. I'm about 10 years younger than him. But we've had some very similar experiences with owls and weird lights and some dangerous stuff too. But as far as like trying to figure out where I'm talking about, it's just kind of to the right of Fayetteville. I was in third grade, and me and two other people in my class, we're in the middle school year, got pulled out of class for a day for a battery of tests. We're told that they're IQ tests, okay? And so, we go through the whole school day, take the test, go back to class, not really think much about it. A couple days later, maybe a week later, I was a kid, it's hard to tell, I get by myself pulled into the school library by the principal. Principal sits me down at this table across from a man and a woman. Thinking back, I think they were probably in their early 30s or so. They were wearing like dark suits, and they say that they were the people who asked people to take the test. They claimed that they were from Mensa, and then they had questions for me. And I blinked, and I have a missing time event. I blink, and I'm back in my class. And I look around, and I'm kind of disconcerted, but I'd had several missing time incidents as a kid. So I was kind of used to it at that point. I was like, well, nobody's upset with me. Everything, I guess, is okay. I don't know what this is about. I knew I couldn't talk to anybody about it in my life. So I just kind of was like, well, I guess this is just how my life still is. Went about my day. Go back, fast forward to dinner that night. And I just offhand mentioned to my parents that I talked to these people, and we had, because of an IQ test, and they're like, "What IQ test?" And I had to explain, the week before. And my father was a very strange person in a lot of ways. He was very secretive, very quiet. He was a Vietnam era veteran who had never talked anything about his service at all, like anything ever. He just would admit that he had been in service, and then he wasn't in service anymore. And that's all he would ever say. And he got really angry that I had been tested in that way. Never really explained to me why. He actually called the school the next day and chewed out the principal, and it was a big deal. And then it wasn't a big deal anymore. No one ever said anything else about it. A year later, I was a small kid, and I was picked on a lot. It was a very, very poor area, very poor school. A lot of behavioral issues, a lot of broken families. It was a hard place to be. And so there was a lot of fights and stuff. And one day in fourth grade, I got into a fight. This kid just picked on me. I ended up hurting the kid. And I got taken to the principal's office. And the principal, I guess, remembered the bad experiences of dealing with my father in the previous year and other times. And he's like, well, teacher said you didn't start this. As long as the other kids' parents don't try to push this, I'm okay with not telling your folks if you are. And I'm like, fine, because I knew that, my dad, it was a bit bad. He was not a very good person. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. No problem, dude. We got this. 3 or 4 days later, principal comes to the class, and I'm like, oh, well, I guess the jig is up. I guess something has happened. And I think I'm going to the principal's office. I'm actually going to the library. Get pulled into the library, and there's this couple, this man and this woman in dark dress clothes, sitting at the table, and it's the same people. But this time, they claim that they're FBI agents. They have questions about the fight, and then they have questions about my classes and my grades. They have questions about other things. And this time I don't have a missing time event. They just finish up, they say thanks, they send me back to my class, and I never hear from them again. During this same time frame, and as an aside, I did not know until I was an adult that Mensa is just this club that people who think they're smarter in. Like when you're a kid, like some group of adults tells you something, that's what it is. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like it's your principle. So like this is, you tell me that this is, the police, then it's the police. And,
right.
This is what I was told. And so, like, imagine my surprise as an adult, I find out that the Mensa is just this club for smart people who, you pay an entry fee and they send you a card and you get to say you're in Mensa. Yeah. Like, blew my mind because I never forgot that experience. But throughout this same time frame, there were times when some of us were given these little cups of this pink liquid in it. And we were told it's fluoride. They told us to drink it. I always refused. I never did it. This was about the same time as that test. And the 2 or 3 times they tried to get me to take it, I never would smell bad. I just didn't trust it. And I was kind of a defiant kid. We all had our issues. It was a poor place. And it just always felt connected to me. Those things felt connected. Well, last week, I was randomly on Facebook. And the reels on Facebook, like the little clips of things that people put out. Every once in a while, I'll click on one and I'll scroll through. And sometimes it's interesting. Most of the time, it's not. Yeah. But I saw this one that started out. And I decided to watch it because it had the image of Zinner cards and this thing. I didn't know it at the time, but apparently it is called a Lowenfield mosaic. You guys know what that is?
No.
It's a tool that psychologists use mostly for kids. And these shaped. Some of them are like squares, some of them are circles, some of them are diamonds, and they're color coded. And so you give them to a kid and you say, hey, make a picture with this.
Oh, okay. I know what those are.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I had hope looking up what they were called because I was like, I don't know what this is called. I don't know how to explain this. But that's what they're called. And it's a tool that a psychologist uses to kind of figure out what your mental state is when you're a kid, because kids have a hard time explaining these things. Sometimes adults do too. And I'm like, well, I'm going to watch this because Zinner cards are interesting for sure. And it goes on to talk about all these people from the time frame that I was in elementary and middle school going through and having these tests given.
Yeah. When
they were told it was part of a special, like an advanced education kind of thing. And they were all asked weird questions by like authority figures. And they were all told different things. But none of their classmates knew anything about it. And most of them remember the weird pink thing in the little cup that they were told to drink, who they were told was fluoride. And then some of them remember something about that test. Well, I have a memory that I've had my entire life that I can't place in the context of my normal life as a kid, where my mother took me to this house in the middle of the town I lived in. And she said that the person who lived in the house was her friend. Well, my mother didn't really like very many people. She's not a personal person. She didn't have friends. She didn't want friends. But she claimed this person was her friend and that she had to have a conversation with her and needed to go play in her friend's kid's room while they did that. So they take me to this, what I'm told is her son's room. And it's this room that's full of toys and charts and posters and bright colored things. But there's no bed. There is a table and some chairs. They set me at the table and they show me, they put in front of me this very intricate pattern of those blocks from the Lowenfield mosaic. And then the lady dumps it out, puts it back in front of me and said, recreate this. Put it back where it belongs. We'll be back in a couple of hours. You have to go have some coffee. And I don't know how long I was in that room, but by the time they got back, I had put all those blocks back into place where they had originally been. And they were like, great job. That's awesome. And we left. And I never saw that lady again for the rest of my life. But here's this reel a week ago connecting all these things together. And no one has any real. And I looked through the comments, and it's full of these people saying, none of my classmates remember the stuff that I do. And, I've asked my friends about this throughout my life, and no one remembers. And I have too. The few people who I have had contact with as an adult who none of them were my classmates at the time, but they went to school in the same region of North Carolina as me.
Right.
And they're my age. And they're all like, John, I don't know what you're talking about. That's insane. And I have no idea.
So what time in the 80s was this?
Okay, so I was in third grade. So third grade for me, I was born in 81. Third grade would be
89.
89. Should have been 89, yeah.
Huh. So I was not tested for gifted program until my junior year of high school at the end of the junior year. And the tests I was given were very like that. I think it was a legit intelligence test. Is what they do with the mosaic thing is in my case, it was timed. So they would show you a shape without the lines to show the pieces that were in it. And then they'd say, okay, recreate this. And the person who did my test was young. I suspect he was a grad school student at the university that was in our town, in our city. And he basically said, I'm here to test your intelligence to see if you can get into the gifted program. And that's, he was really friendly and everything. He wasn't wearing the man in black suit because I probably would have turned right around and been like, oh, nope, I'm leaving. No, not you, sir. Not today. Because I was a paranoid kid. But it was the same kind of thing. Here, have this, do this. And then in the timing, they would test it. And then my mom got the results, but she wouldn't let me see them. And by the time I was an adult and asked her for the results, she didn't know where they were. And then she claimed that, I never had those. Now, I have to say that may not be anything weird other than the fact that my mother was very good at not telling the truth and has her own mental health issues. So that could have been the case. But some bits and pieces of what you're saying made sense. What did that pink liquid smell like?
I'm trying to think back. It was kind of mothballs.
Ugh.
So it wasn't pleasant, Yeah. Because at first, because I remember looking at it, and what is that antibiotic you give kids that's pink and tastes like bubblegum?
Amoxicillin.
It looked like amoxicillin. I was like, well, I don't need medicine. And then I get closer to me and it smelled like mothballs. I was like, but at the time I was like, this smells like a grandma's closet. But I now know mothballs. But I was like, nope, this is not happening. I'm not doing this. And I was that kid, in like second grade I found out anything I found out I wasn't required to do. I just didn't do. Like I found out in second grade, I was not required to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right.
So I never did again. Which ironically was the one time of my entire childhood, the one time that my father stood up for me, which you wouldn't expect being the person that he was. He was like, I was in the military. He doesn't have to do this. If he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't have to do it. It's the one time he ever stood up for me.
So I take it your relationship with your parents wasn't great.
My father should never have had children. He was, he would have, he admitted that many times throughout his life. He's like, he just was not cut out to be a father. And he was better to his kids than his parents were to him. And he kind of for which is his upbringing was horrifying, and so to him he did better than his parents, so that was okay, that was enough. But no, he should never have had children. As an adult, he apologized to me when I was an adult. And he's like, I made a lot of mistakes and I did a lot of bad things and none of this shit happened. So by the time I was in my early 30s, I had forgiven him for a lot of the things that he did. He also was very, very conservative religious. He ended up being a Southern Baptist minister. through my early years. But he actually had us in a cult. It was a benign cult, but it was a cult in rural North Carolina. A few of the members of which actually left that church for the Branch Davidians about 6 months before the thing happened. So, and actually, this is a weird story, but a kind of a non-paranormal weird story, where the night that one of those guys left, came to our house at 11 o'clock at night and beat down my parents' door to try to convince my parents to take us to Waco and to go with him. These guys were so convinced that this guy was Jesus that he was like, I'm trying to save you guys. I love you guys. You're my friends. And I want your family to be safe and to be saved. And you have to come to Texas with me. And my parents, and I've never been a good sleeper. I've been in a sonic my entire life. So I'm awake when this happens. So I remember this conversation. I'm listening through the wall, basically, of my parents trying very desperately to show him how delusional he sounds and how he needs to think more and to realize that it is a real cult.
Oh.
And 6 months later, Waco happened, and he died.
Damn.
That's horrible.
Yeah, but that church, I say cult. I mean, most people probably don't realize most cults aren't like that. Most cults aren't Waco. Most cults don't have multiple wives and AK-47s and a compound. Right. Most of them are just weird churches that have very closeted beliefs that have some form of control over their people. And that's what this was. But there were things that this guy preached that weren't part of Christianity. And when I became a teenager, when I started questioning things when I was like 12 and 13, I started looking for the things that this guy talked about. And this is part of how I figured out it was a cult, is a lot of things that he talked about weren't actually in the book that Christians believe. And so I kind of put a bunch of stuff to the side. And then it's kind of part of how I ended up being a complete materialist, total atheist, because I realized a bunch of things that we probably won't get into here. But this year, I was reading Aleister Crowley, The Book of Lies. And there is a section in The Book of Lies where he's talking about, everything he wrote in this stuff is allegory. He's talking about the Antichrist and the Whore of Babylon. And as I'm reading this, I'm remembering a sermon that I heard when I was 10 years old in this church. And now I know why I couldn't find, when I was trying to look back and research these things that this church had taught me. He was reading Aleister Crowley and calling it the Bible.
Oh, boy.
Let's also say that by definition, all religions are cults. It's just
Absolutely.
whether or not they're big or small ones.
Or harmful or not harmful.
Yeah.
And even ones that are benign sometimes end up being harmful, if not to the entire group, to a subset of the group that's within it. Because the last Christian church I was involved in high school turned out to be a weirdo fundamentalist cult.
Mm.
And that was bad. Didn't like it. Thankfully, they didn't run off to hang out with the Branch Davidians, because that would have really sucked.
Yeah.
Right. But my best friend and I basically stood up in the middle of church one day and we're like, okay, it's time for us to leave. And being told that we were possessed of demons because we thought the Equal Rights Amendment was a good thing was kind of the last straw.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah.
It's like, no. No, dude, you're wrong.
I don't, going back to the whole gifted and talented thing, I was in gifted and talented in, I want to say 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. I don't remember. I mean, the problem is I don't really remember anything from that time period. I have little snippets of memory. So I know that I was learning to use Commodore PET computers. That was the result. I know by the end of 6th grade, I was doing 9th grade work, only to go over to junior high where they had no advanced programs and had to do 7th grade work.
Oh.
Yeah. And I realized as I was working on the book, I think I started kindergarten when I was 4. And so I was 5 shortly after that, but I was the youngest one in the class, which was part of the reason that they didn't want to put me in, they didn't want me to skip grades because I was already the youngest one in the class.
Yeah. I went to kindergarten for one day when I was 5. And then they put me into first grade because I already knew all the kindergarten stuff.
Okay.
And again, I was the smallest kid in the class. I got picked on a lot. But then after 3rd grade, when I went into 4th grade, they wanted to promote me to skip another grade to go directly into 5th grade. And my mom was like, no, she's already, the smallest kid in the class.
Right.
And that's just not gonna, and to be honest, Mom had her issues, but I think she was actually right in that decision. But it being promoted and being the smallest kid in class does not always make for a great experience.
Yeah, and I got picked on a lot when I was in elementary school. Not nothing like kids get picked on today. I'm not going to say I had a serious bullying issue or anything, but I was definitely one of the dorkier kids in school.
Oh, I can't believe it. Come on.
And so, I got picked on here and there. And so I think, that would have been much worse had I been pushed up a grade or 2 to match where I was, But like those tests, my mother swears I scored a 160. And I'm like, there's no way I scored a 160. I'm not that smart. That's really high. So when I went through all her paperwork, I was really hoping to find the gifted and talented paperwork, which I assumed she had, but it's nowhere to be found. So I don't know. If I remember correctly, I was just on the border of being gifted and talented, which sounds more accurate. So they were like, oh, well, you're just under the mark we're looking for, but we have room, so we're going to take you too.
Yeah, you're kind of cool. You're all right. Yeah, you can come play with us. Yeah, how many gifted and talented kids have problems when they get older and they have this weird, I don't know, they get burnt out really easily and do poorly as they get older. And, sometimes I'm like, maybe that didn't help. Maybe that wasn't, I felt stupid because I had it in senior year and nowhere else.
Yeah.
So by that point I was kind of like, yeah.
I think it's partially the way the school system works too, where it tends to move at the speed of the slowest student.
Yeah.
And then you have the kids who are smarter who get bored, who get restless, who, and it's like it really should have more of an individual sort of orientation. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I don't think the system we have works very well because it's more based on just memorization. And, memorize these facts, spit them back to us. It's not teaching you practical life skills. It's not teaching you how to think for yourself. It's teaching you to obey.
Yeah. Yeah. The modern education system we have today was basically invented during the Industrial Revolution to basically create good workers.
Right. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. Quick mid-show break here. Contact info and a recommendation. Contact info, everything can be found at wheredidtheroadgo.com. There are links to all our social media. And if you want to find the Substack I started, that's under the blog link. And, of course, the website contains all the shows, all the way back to the beginning, and a link to become a Patreon if you want to support us. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content with almost every show, sometimes extra bonus stuff as well. The show's a week or so early and commercial-free. So there you go. And it helps us out a great deal, as I said. As for a recommendation, I'm going to go with a show that came out just pre-pandemic, actually, that I finally got around to watching. It was highly recommended, and I just never watched it. It's called Altered Carbon, and it was on Netflix. I'm assuming it's still on Netflix. Really, really good show. The first season is very explicit, almost surprisingly so, on level with something like The Boys or Westworld. The second season, not as much. I'm not all the way through it, but it raises some really deep questions about who we are and immortality and transhumanism and stuff like that. And it's a also tons of action and violence. And yeah, it's just really, really solid all the way through. So I highly recommend, if you haven't watched Altered Carbon, check it out. All right, back to the show. So I am here with Barbara Fisher and Jonathan Bartholomew. How do I say your last name? Is that right?
Bartholomew, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I ended it with an L. That's why I was asking.
Lots of people pronounce it that way.
We'll just call you Bart.
I've been J Bart for a lot of people for a lot of years.
Well, see, there you go. Perfect.
It's nice and catchy, actually.
Yeah, it is.
So we were talking about the whole gifted and talented thing, and I've heard so many stories about people who have had weird experiences like yours, Jonathan, in these gifted and talented type situations where things didn't quite add up later. And like I said, my own, I mean, I know I went and did computer classes and stuff like that because of it. I did this summer thing, which I have paperwork I found that my mom had, which was like this going around Long Island where we lived and looking at all the, like where the glaciers formed, the moraines and stuff like that. It was like a natural science type of thing. So,
well, that sounds cool. Like fun.
Yeah, I think I loved that, actually. And that teacher was one of the best teachers I had, easily probably the best teacher I had in elementary school. He was so supportive of everything. But like I said, I never found the gifted and talented paperwork, but I also don't have any weird memories associated with it. Like, it all makes sense. But I've heard a lot of stories where people say there was this weird thing where they tested me and I don't know what it was. And so I don't know what to make of that unless, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking, your dad was in Vietnam, you said.
Mm-hmm.
And did they experiment on him or expose him to something and wanted to see how that affected you?
I've often wondered that, and to add to that, we moved around a lot when I was a kid. Most of it was in North Carolina, but we never lived in the same house for more than about a year. And he very deliberately changed jobs a lot before. I was 14 when he became a Southern Baptist minister, and he kept that job for over a decade. But there were times when I would come home from school and our entire house would be packed up and we'd be going somewhere else. It always seemed like he was running from something. Oh. And he wasn't a drinker, and I don't believe it was something like illegal gambling or anything. He wasn't a drug guy. And I think that because as an adult, I know I've unfortunately had a lot of friends who have fallen down some of those holes, and it can be very sad to see someone deteriorate from drugs, or even from degenerate gambling. Like once you lose control over one of those things, it merely takes your life out. I don't think that's what he was going through. I think he was running from something. And I don't know what would have happened if I had continued to be in public school. And I say that for this reason. For my last year in public school, pardon me, was my 6th grade year. From 7th grade on, my parent pulled me and my younger brothers out of public school and homeschooled us because lots of reasons, but it's legal in North Carolina, at least at the time, to do that.
Yeah.
And so I spent the last half of my school career, basically I would take a month out of each of those years and do a year's worth of schoolwork, get it out of the way, and then do whatever I wanted for the rest of the year. What I wanted to a point, this was a situation where also, unfortunately, my father put me to work. I got a job, and I worked all the way until college, and he took half my money. So again, not the best upbringing, but
you learned how capitalism works.
See, that's useful.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know what would have happened in subsequent school years, really, because we also I moved schools a lot too. I was in that school the second half of 3rd grade and most of 4th grade, and then we moved again. So who knows if there would have been more strange encounters with people who may not have been who they said they were or not.
And didn't Strieber have something weird like this happen to him?
He called it the secret school. But his dad was in the military or in one of the intelligence services, and he had weird tests at school, intelligence, the IQ tests and then psych tests, and they weren't given to all of the kids. It was a very small number of kids who got those tests, but he said that he remembered that they were all kids whose parents worked for the military in some capacity.
Right.
I have a friend who it wasn't in childhood when this happened. That's not true. He had one series of tests when he was a child. And then when he was in high school, right before summer break, he got various tests. And it was interestingly, it sounds to me like there was testing of remote viewing going on. Now that I've read the remote viewing protocols that were used at Stanford, these were very similar. And, so he's telling me about it. I'm like, have you ever read anything about, anything by Russell Targ or, anybody from Stanford ever heard of the Stanford experiments, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, what? I don't think you ever hear Stargate. Yeah, it's a TV show. I'm like, okay. All right.
He's
dude.
right.
Well, let me just say this. And so, I started describing stuff and he's like, yeah, they made us think and clear our minds and see what pictures came up.
Oh, wow.
So he was doing some weird crap there. And it corresponds closely enough to the time period when the U.S. Army was working with those kinds of, testing. So maybe it's either a civilian branch doing something or something else. But what's interesting is, at least in my case, you had to have a teacher suggest you for gifted program.
Mm.
And the teacher who suggested me was my gym teacher.
Oh, that's
I never understood that.
Yeah.
That always sounded a little suspect to me. Okay.
Yeah, again, I don't really remember anything. So I don't remember taking the test. I don't know anything about, like I said, all I do is I was in it. But like I said, the vague memory I have was that I just barely was in it.
Right.
And there's no way I had a 160 IQ and barely was in Gifted and Talented. 160 is insanely high. I think my mom just didn't remember right.
Yeah. I have no idea.
And IQ tests aren't that great of a
Accurate
factor anyway.
either.
Yeah. Because, most people are smart at something.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the thing. If the school system would work to focus on people's strengths, help them in their weaknesses, but help them accentuate those strengths, I think we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah.
I know people who are a little bit slow, but boy, do they notice things.
Yeah.
They were in, what do you call it? Like slow, the special ed classes back in school and stuff, but they're not stupid at all.
No.
They notice things, they remember things, and it's like, well, I didn't notice that. I didn't, like, you remember differently than me. I'm probably wrong,
Yeah.
But
I had an uncle, my father's older brother. He was very dyslexic, like the most dyslexic person I've ever met in my life. He had to memorize street signs to be able to get a driver's license. Dyslexic, it's just on site. But he had an eidetic memory.
Yeah,
and he was one of the best artists I've ever known in my entire life. He actually, and I can't really get into it on a recorded thing that's going to go out on things. He was an art forger.
Oh, wow.
A very good one. And he, to the day he died, thought he was stupid because he couldn't read.
Yeah.
It's just the word dyslexic didn't exist, when he was younger.
Yeah.
In the 50s and 60s. That just wasn't a thing. And so he just, he had been told by, he only made it to eighth grade or something. And that was basically social promotion. And, he just quit and started doing art after that. And,
wow, just lost what I was going to say. It was something directly related to what you just said. Yeah, I know my mom was dyslexic. But again, she was old enough where there was no dyslexia. There was, I'm pretty sure she had cognitive issues as well, which didn't improve with age. Because it almost seemed like, if she had been sharp her whole life, I would have said, oh, she has dementia, she's getting older. But it's like, nope, this is the same stuff she's always done. It's just a little worse now.
Yeah.
And she would mix up letters and numbers all the time and names all the time. And it would just be like, okay, my dad one day is like, I don't think your mom gets numbers right. Like, I don't think dyslexia was even in his lexicon. And so it's like, yeah, I think she's dyslexic. And he's like, okay, because she's always mixing up, switching numbers and letters. And I'm like, yeah, that's dyslexia. But, we didn't know. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we still don't know.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
As far as, the IQ tests and stuff, they test basic stuff. They taste like the ones I took apparently were primarily like problem solving. So
yeah.
That was that. And I know I improved my own problem solving skills by playing Infocom games when I was a kid. I don't know if either of you are familiar with those.
Yeah, I know what that is.
Yeah, they were text-based, and because that's the thing. That was the first thing I did in the Gifted and Talented program was play these text adventures. They weren't the Infocom ones. They were real basic ones, but I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like it's like reading a book, but you're in it. And
oh, okay. Yeah.
So when
sort of the choose your own adventure game type thing.
Right, but you had to type in what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But it was all text. And
right.
So when I got a Commodore 64, I started playing Infocom games because a friend of mine had some and we would work together and trying to figure them out, but they required you to kind of think outside the box.
Yeah.
You couldn't just solve them with straight logic. You had to really think around. Sometimes it was wordplay. Sometimes it was, something that they wrote it so you assumed something.
Yes.
And then you'd have to be like, wait a second, hang on, read that again, So I give that a lot of credit for my problem solving ability, which apparently was already decent to begin with. But I think that really strengthened it.
Yeah, it probably did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the thing that stopped getting me picked on at school was getting into metal.
Well, you looked scary then.
I don't think I ever looked scary when I was in school, but when we moved upstate, there were a bunch of people who were into metal. Some of the coolest kids in the school were into metal, and one of them befriended me, and then everyone was fine with it. I mean, no one really picked on me to begin with. It's very different. Being in upstate New York is very different than being on Long Island.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but like getting into metal it gave me that community there.
I love how, metalheads are supposed to be scary, and they're some of the nicest people I've ever known.
Generally. Yeah.
It's just like, no, not scary, Ma, not scary.
Oh, that's because if you're upset, you listen to something heavy and angry and you feel less upset.
Yeah.
You don't bottle up that anger.
Yep. Chills you right out.
So I had a couple of weird things happen to me just in the last couple of weeks, including some very weird dreams, but one of them happened today. I'll go with the one that happened today. Yeah. So I've had two dreams that are very, very much like I was in a virtual reality. One of them very much felt like a big dream that I don't completely understand yet, and of course don't remember all of because it was a very long dream. Now I will say I have spent a little bit of time playing the game Evil Inside 2, which happens inside basically a virtual reality. So right. I'm kind of like, well, how much is that influencing these dreams? But today, when I woke up from one, I was laying there going, okay, should I get up? I could probably sleep another 15 minutes or so. And there was a loud thump from the dead center of my room above my bed.
Oh, in the air?
Yes.
Oh.
Because I've heard thumps from the roof, and I thought it was raccoons and stuff or squirrels, and it's just echoing. And I actually put a camera on the roof and never caught a single one.
Mm-hmm.
But this was in the room, and it was just like thump. And I was like, oh, that was weird. Okay.
I guess I'm getting up now.
Exactly.
Because I got to leave this room.
Well, it's not so much that I have to leave. I just took it as a symbol of you should get up. And it's like, all right. But the other one, and I've talked about this before, and a few people have mentioned something similar, but have either of you had the experience where you hear a noise you don't realize you're hearing until it stops?
Yeah, usually it's far away noises or a soft noise that's repeating, like a hum.
Right.
Yeah.
So this happened within the last week or so, where again, I was laying in bed going to sleep, and I was hearing a motor run. And it kind of sounded like a heater or something like that, except I didn't have a heater on. And there's nothing where my bedroom is that should make that sound. And I didn't really like consciously acknowledge it. Like it was there, and then it turned off. And I went, wait a minute, what just turned off? Nothing makes that sound.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a lot of people tell me over the years, no, not the least of which several times my own mother, who has had a lot of very strange experiences, that whenever they have an experience where there's something other around them, whatever other means, because it seems to vary.
Yeah.
Once that experience is over, once they're no longer seeing what they're seeing or hearing what they're hearing or feeling what they're feeling, they realize that they had heard a constant noise the whole time. And then when the experience is over, there's this vacuum of this soundlessness.
Yes.
And that sounds like what you're talking about.
Yeah, but without an experience behind it, it's just that.
Right, for sure.
Anything weird happened to you lately, Barbara?
Either the resident cat ghosts, of which we have 2. You would think we would have more, but it's only 2. Either it's them or some other small, shadowy, spectral type of creature that's, just been showing itself out of the corner of my eye off and on the past week or so. I'll be like, oh, look, there's Crowley. Oh, wait, there's nothing there. Because it'll be a little black cat, and Crowley's our little black cat currently. And, oh, look, it's Crow. Okay, he's over there. And then the other ghost is a big gray cat. And we do have another big gray cat. And I'll be like, oh, look, it's Jeffrey's asleep in the other room right there. I can see him from the door.
What if he's astral projecting?
You see, I don't know. I do know, though, that we have the 2 ghosts because I have seen like both Jeffrey awake and then the ghost of Ozzy, which we've decided is the ghost of Ozzy, although it could be something in the shape of Ozzy. It could be a time slip. I don't know what it is, but it looks exactly like the cat we had for almost 20 years, whose name was Ozymandias. And he's a big gray cat. And a couple of times he's been so close to solid, that it's like, oh my God, it's him, like right there. Wow. And he usually shows up and is checking in on Zach because he was Zach's cat. But the little black one also was Zach's cat, but she just seems to be just playing around the house. She just, she's a very playful cat when she was around, and she just seems to be scuttling very quickly. Or I don't know, my vision's gone bad. I haven't had anything unsettle me.
Okay.
I've had some weird lights outside in the woods, but that was closer to November and then late January, middle to late January. And, I've gotten to the point where I'm used to those.
Right.
I just kind of go, oh yeah, it's you guys. I'm not going to stare at you because I don't want to piss anybody off. So I'm just going to look over here. I'm not going to. So I haven't been sitting up and looking outside and, until 3 a.m. to see these things. I just happen to see them because I have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Right. And I check out the window. I don't know why I do that, because if there's something out there, do I need to know? No, I probably don't. Is it going to help me go to the bathroom? No, it's not. Why do I do this? Myself.
If I get up to go to the bathroom, I usually look outside on my way through. And sometimes I really regret it because for me that, I'm sleeping when it's daylight out a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
And I have curtains that are, make it completely dark inside.
Oh, yeah, I do that. We have those too.
And I'll walk by the window and I'll go and just casually look outside and be like, oh my God, I'm blind. Why did I do that?
Yeah, you'd think I'd know better.
But there's such darkening curtains. Like I forget what time it is and that it's really bright outside.
Yeah.
But
so that's embarrassing. But yeah, everybody's done that at least once.
So was there
blinded themselves?
Anything else, Jonathan, on since we last talked that was weird?
Yeah, there's a little bit of kind of a bummer one actually. And this is going to be. What's funny is like anything like within like the weird world is it's always stuff that like someone can look at it is weird or just like a random coincidence. But so we were living here in Roanoke, and then we moved up to New York, and then came back to Roanoke, Virginia. And before we moved, so this would have been probably in April because we moved in May. I had, a few months before, I had started this tattoo. It's a Stephen King tattoo based on like the Dark Tower books, and we're talking like 20 hours worth of work over the course of a couple of years. And I had one piece left that was going to be about 5 hours. And, I knew that I had to finish it before I moved. And my thought of it was, I don't know how long it's going to be before I come visit with money for a tattoo. But I had this urgency of I can't move without this tattoo being done, or it's never going to get finished. It's just never going to get finished. And I thought that I felt that way because sometimes life gets in the way of stuff, and you get busy, and you don't get to make the trips you think you're going to make.
Sure.
And priorities change, any number of things. But I made a point. I got it done. This tattoo artist is a good friend of mine. It's just a guy who's a very, very good dude. And about a month and a half after, no more than that, maybe 4 months after we moved, he died.
Oh.
He was 45.
Wow.
And in really good health, more or less, at least to my knowledge. And he was a guitar player. He played in like a grunge band. So, one Friday, he did a bunch of tattoos, went to a bar, did a set, had a beer, went home, sat down in his chair, had a heart attack.
Damn.
Jeez.
And I heard about the next day, and the first thing came to my head was I knew I was never going to get another chance to finish that tattoo.
Huh.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like it has that feeling for me of why would I have had such a certainty that was my last chance to finish that tattoo.
Yeah. Some part of you knew. Which again, asks the question: like, are we living in a predetermined world, or do we have choices?
Exactly.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time. Barbara, why don't you go first and tell people where they can find you?
You can go to 6degreesofjohnkeel.com. That's 6 like the number, and then degreesofjohnkeel.com, all one word with the dot where I said the dot. And all of my episodes are there. I think it's around 200 of them. John would know because he just listened to all of them. I am so impressed with him because he listened to them all in a month, and it took me 2 years to make them. So he is a determined person. But that's where you can find me. And I'm also around on Facebook and Instagram. There's a 6 Degrees of John Keel Instagram account, and I do weird art and say weird stuff on the Instagram. I did a series of Mothman pieces of art over winter break, over Christmas. So
nice.
Yeah.
And your shirt's 6 and not 7 degrees of John
It
Keel.
truly is 6, dude. There may be another universe.
That's what I'm wondering.
And,
it can't just be my brain being wrong.
Switching back and forth. You've been switching back and forth between that universe and this one. I have a friend who swore up and down that his hairbrush kept disappearing into the universe that had Datsuns instead of Nissans.
Wait, what?
Datsuns instead of Nissans?
Don't both exist?
Nope.
Wait, what?
Datsun is the old name.
Yeah.
They changed their name to Nissan.
Oh, okay. I've heard of both.
But the way that it worked, it seemed like one day we went to sleep and there were Datsuns all over the place. And then we woke up and everything was Nissan. And yeah. So, every time he'd lose his hairbrush, he'd swear up and down, well, damn it, I left it in the universe with the Datsuns. I'll have to go to sleep and wake up in the Nissan universe, or in the Datsun universe, grab it and come back.
All right.
So yes, I've always been a weird nerd and had weird nerd friends. So
that's good.
Now you know.
So Jonathan, so I don't screw up the name of your podcast because it's long. Unlike the name of my podcast, which is really, really short. What's the name of your podcast?
We are Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic, and it's on Spotify and pretty much everything else. I also have a Substack. It's called The Light from Albemuth. It mostly deals with my kind of adventures with tarot. I actually recently also put out an anthology dealing with creativity in tarot, which is really fun to put out, and that's through Substack. And then you can find my book through most places. Just look for Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine. And
the Substack is spelled what?
The Light from Albemuth, ALBEMUTH, like the Philip K. Dick reference.
All right. Excellent. Thank you both.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out, man.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. I can't do this without you, so thank you for supporting the show, and know that every positive thing that comes out of this show is partially because of you. I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons who are pledging $10 or more a month: Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Marty Garza, Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Marthartha, Midnight Review Presents, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Abby Allen, Cherry Trapezoid, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Billuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Corey Nelson, Diane B., MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, J. Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, Jonathan Frost, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Shurek, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda from Michigan, Linz Jackson K., MJ Armstrong, Mark Shoemaker, Mark Brady, Mark Smith, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sasha McHale, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Stacy Sherwood, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Victoria, Vincent Treewell, Will Cherry, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Colin Karras, Craig Sagastumi, and Matthew Brown. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. There is, of course, a Patreon extra for this show, like almost every other show, and you can get that by going to wheredidtheroadgo.com and signing up to become a Patreon. Just click on the big Patreon link. It's only $3 a month, and you get a lot of extra content all month long. Shows a week early, sometimes more than a week early, and commercial free. You can also purchase individual shows there, and on iTunes as well. I want to welcome 3 new Patreons: Savannah, Lori H., and Cherry Trapezoid. Welcome. I hope you like the content, and thank you for joining up. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.